Morning, everyone, or afternoon, as it's just turned. This webinar is recorded. This is an East of England preparation for your first physiotherapy role. We have a number of different people talking on a panel today. So we have two people from Alpha Physiotherapy, which is a local physiotherapy private clinic in Ipswich. That's Jimmy and Lyndsey just in the chat there. We have Chris Holmes, who is a recent graduate from Essex University. He graduated last year and got his first Band 5 job immediately after graduating. We have Jen Powner, who works within the NHS and has done for some time and conducts interviews and has actually worked with, I think, Lyndsey previously, haven't you? And that was a bit of a surprise when we were putting all this together. And we're also joined by Sylvia Wojciechowski, who is going to be, who is the chair of the council for the CSP. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off hearing from Sylvia. So in a minute, the slides will go and you'll be able to see everyone's faces a lot more clearly, but we'll be hearing from Sylvia for about 15 minutes. And then we'll move on to a bit of a panel discussion. So these are questions that you've submitted. They'll be put to Chris, Jenny, Lyndsey and Jimmy, and we'll just hear what they've got to say on the questions you've submitted. And then we'll move on to a Q&A section. So again, please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A chat. So without further ado and without waffling too much on for too much more, Sylvia, all yours.
Thank you, Phil. So hi everyone, lovely to have you join us and give up your lunchtime today. Hopefully you're going to pick up lots of amazing tips and pieces of information from all of those speaking today. I'm sure we're going to learn lots. I've been asked just to sort of set the scene a little bit around the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, how it can support, and sort of some of the things that it gets involved in, because I'm aware some of you may not be as familiar with some of the roles, and in fact some of you may not be members. So I hope that by the end of my little talk you might also feel motivated to join the CSP. But before I start with that, I'm just going to do a little bit of it about me, really. So as Phil said, I'm currently the chair of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy Council, and we are a body of 12 elected people by or elected physios by the membership to come and represent membership voices, concerns to the CEO, who's John Cowman, and to the leadership team. And we work on the strategic direction of the CSP. And I feel that it's a very, very privileged place to be, and it's something that I've really enjoyed doing. And this is coming into my third year, although my second year as chair. But it is a volunteer job. So like many of student reps and such as Phil, and also, you know, sort of our network reps, there's a lot of volunteer work that does go on in the CSP, and I can talk about why some of that, getting involved with that is really good. But in my day job, I worked for over 20 years as an advanced practice physiotherapist. I was the cross-site lead for advanced practice physiotherapist in a large trust down in the southeast of England, and also the orthopedic strategic lead. But I've now moved into the integrated care system. So that's going through massive reorganizations currently, but I'm the head of all the allied health professionals for what is now the Thames Valley integrated care system. So that's spanning from Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire and Berkshire region. So that's probably enough about me. But the CSP, I don't know if you're aware, but we now have about 67,000 members belonging to the CSP. And that's from yourselves as student members, support workers and chartered physiotherapists, and also internationally educated physiotherapists. We are a professional body, a trade union, but also provide that educational advice and support as well, as many of you may be aware. And all of the physiotherapy degree courses are currently accredited by the CSP, and so we work closely with the universities to sort of align the education and training programs that you're receiving. But part of being a member, which you don't have to be as a physiotherapist, although if you wanted to call yourself a chartered physiotherapist on qualifying, you would need to join the CSP. But one of the values, well, I'm going to talk about lots of values because I think there's lots of things that are of fantastic use, but you will even within your student years, you will get insurance to go out and volunteer at events such as the London Marathon or the Great Bath Run. So, you know, there are things that you can do as a Chartered Society of Physiotherapy student member that brings about value that you can add on to CVs when you're looking for first jobs. And I think it's about what can you add to CVs that makes you stand out from other colleagues or other physios that may be applying. We also are a huge advocate for us as a profession. So behind the scenes, all of the CSP staff will be working hard with the parliamentary bodies that exist, committees. We have 4 actual MPs currently in Parliament who are physios by background, so that's a big help for us, so we can have quiet behind the scenes corridor conversations to try and influence policy, and you know, also use the media to sort of raise our profile. So I don't know if any of you saw last week in the media, there was a story about how people who are suffering from strokes are not getting the adequate rehab that they need. And so highlighting stories such as that really tries to bring home not only to the public, but also to those commissioning services around why we need to create more jobs within physiotherapy, which of course is good news for all of us. So things like that are very much part and parcel of everyday work of the CSP. So within the staff of the CSP themselves, they also have teams that are there to support you with education, professional inquiries, student inquiries. There's offices that you can reach into if you've got any concerns. And it's something that, you know, it is, I always say it's one of those things that the more you get involved, the more you get out of it. So it's definitely, so for example, I was at the annual conference last year on the student day, and I sat on a group of on a table with a group of students, and they had joined up to be student representatives, and have found that they've suddenly opened up this huge network of people that they can reach out to at all different levels of seniority, different circumstances where they work. So whether it be in the private sector, the independent sector, hospices, and you've got all those connections. And I know certainly with the ones that I spoke to, I'm still getting emails and messages saying they're applying for such and such a job. Can I look at something for them? Do I have any info, particularly if they're applying for a local hospital in my area, so I can sort of feed back. And so I think the brilliant thing about physiotherapy as a profession is we're not very hierarchical. You know, you shouldn't ever be intimidated to reach out to people. And certainly those of you who are members, if you look on the website, you'll have things such as the interactive CSP page where you can just go in and ask a question. So if you're going on to a particular placement or you're doing your final research work, you can sort of go in and say, does anyone have any experience about this? Is there any particular articles that I could look at or anything like that? And there is no such thing as a silly question. People are always so welcoming and really reach out to support you. And similarly, we have professional networks. And so this could be from physios who are supporting people to go back to work. So within occupational work support, it could be in respiratory, pediatrics. So we have sort of around 30 professional networks. Again, very happy that you reach out into them, and they're really happy for you to sort of engage and be part of committees as well, which is also another fantastic thing to sort of add into CVs and making you stand out. And there are, in addition to that, we have diversity networks. And we also have regional and national networks. So, for example, this event on today is organised by the East of England regional event, and Phil is obviously doing a sterling job representing the group and the area. And so, you know, reaching in, stepping up to sort of join, facilitate. It is one of those things that, again, as I said, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. So other things that the CSP do put on is we have the annual representative conference as well. So this is something where we run a 2-day conference once a year where you can submit via your networks, or either national or regional networks, or through stewards as well, that, you know, there might be for example, I'm just trying to think, last year I think we had a motion around, should we have more support and education around vestibular issues. And so raising issues like that is bringing forward things that are important to you as a body of professionals and members, and then that's debated in those in that agenda. And I think, you know, Phil may speak to it later. Certainly, it was his first time last year, and I think came away really sort of not only greater understanding of how it works, but also having the connections. And as a result of that, now sits on one of the CSP committees as well, which is fantastic. So there are lots and lots of opportunities. But I think just before I sort of finish off, I would just want to recognise that it is a very challenging job market out there, not just for physiotherapy profession, but for all students currently. You know, I know certainly I can speak firsthand with my son, you know, having graduated, you know, trying to, not as a physio, but, you know, trying to find a job in the current market is challenging. However, I think you need to approach that without fear. There are things that I'll sort of go through, and hopefully we'll also hear from those speaking today about ways that you can progress and try and navigate that. I think firstly, you know, when I qualified, it was certainly a challenging time as well. I can remember there was probably about 50 people applying for, you know, a single job. But you can find ways to navigate around that, and I hopefully I'll just talk you through a few things. I think reach out to people that you maybe are interested in their careers, and ask to have things like a career conversation. So I've definitely reached out to people in all sorts of roles throughout my career, just sort of saying, I'm fascinated to hear about how you got into your position, or what that role means. And people rarely say no, because most people like talking about themselves, to be honest. So it's a great way of reaching out into people and just finding out what paths they've navigated. And very often their paths aren't the one that they originally set out with. There are some twists and turns around that. And once you've built those networks with people, they're often very useful people to lean into, and sort of say, you know, if anything comes up, I'm really interested in this area, or I'd love to explore that. Are there any particular things you could recommend to me? So again, just don't be frightened to reach out to people. I think accept that careers aren't necessarily straight lines anymore as they used to be. So sometimes, even though you might ideally be wanting to look for something that was a full-time post, you know, do take up opportunities, even if they're on a part-time basis, because there's lots of portfolio type careers out there now for people. So it could be that you're working supporting a project in a system such as a commissioning system such as mine, or it could be that you do 1 day a week in a care home as leading exercise classes. So there's lots of different opportunities. So I think just don't necessarily just think NHS. I'm sure we'll hear, you know, there's huge opportunities across all sectors of physiotherapy, and probably in a way increasingly so as the physiotherapy profession becomes more and more diverse. And so, you know, you have sports, voluntary sector, independent sector, military, private sector, and you know, the NHS. But even within my system that I work in, you know, many of our NHS contracts that patients think they're going to see an NHS physio, they're actually not necessarily all run by NHS employed providers. So there is huge variety out there. So I think just be open to looking at lots of different areas. And I would say, I'm nearly coming to the end, Phil, before I run over. I would say think about networking almost more than where the vacancies are, because I think through networking and reaching out into your local areas, your regional networks, maybe some professional networks, and reaching out to your local employers in the area, just saying, can I come and shadow? Is there any sort of voluntary work that I could do? All of those is a way of keeping yourself in their front of mind, so that when an opportunity arises, they'll go, oh, hang on a minute, I know that we had so-and-so come over and they were really interested. I wonder if they're still available. Let's reach out. And they could let you know of a vacancy coming up before perhaps it's even advertised. So I think really focus on networks. And I would, going back to the CSP, really argue that joining the CSP is one of the things that really helps you to build those networks. And just to sort of end on, I think, you know, employability is what you build it on. So look for all of the different opportunities, not just for, you know, what's on your CV, but if there's gaps, can you bring that in through any volunteering, doing a QI project? Don't ever compare yourselves to others, because we're all individuals, and you need to find your own unique selling point. And be really curious, I think, is the most important thing about what the different opportunities are out there. So I will stop there. Hopefully that's motivated you a little bit to think about joining the CSP if you're not already a member, and I'll hand back to Phil.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. That's a fantastic start to the day, and yeah, all the stuff that you were talking about with ARC and networks. So my first ARC last year, I think there's a few fellow ARC attendees from the student representatives in the meeting today. But my network blew up after that, and it really does just sort of broaden your scope of what's available out there. So yeah, getting involved and networking basically. Love that. Thank you very much. Right. So we're going to move on now to our first panelist, Chris Holmes. So, Chris, if you just want to very quickly introduce yourself, and then I'll give you your first question. All yours.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Chris. I am currently working as a Band 5 rotational physiotherapist at Essex, so at Colchester Hospital. I graduated from the University of Essex last summer, And I was actually thinking earlier, I probably had interviewed for this job, or at least applied for the job that I've got this time last year as well. So yeah, it's quite a funny full circle moment.
Fantastic. So, when you were applying for jobs, what did you find was the best way to keep up to date with job openings?
So I think Sylvia kind of covered a few of the bits of this quite well in terms of kind of not being afraid to reach out to people. But I suppose from my side, I can probably cover the more technical aspects in terms of, so I found my job online. So there's a few different websites that you can look for jobs. The one that I use is the one which is run by the NHS. So there's one that is called nhsjobs.com, which, if you actually look at the small print, is an independent company, and is kind of associated with the NHS, but is fully independent. The one that I used is again called NHS Jobs, but it's jobs.nhs.uk. And I might be wrong in this, somebody might be able to correct me, but as far as I'm aware, any NHS jobs need to go onto that website. Jen's nodding, so I think that was right. Yeah. It's a little bit fiddly to work. The search tools aren't fantastic, but on there you'll see like a search box. You'll put in physiotherapist, where you want to work, and you can set a kind of distance radius. Because of the job situation, I ended up setting mine to 50 miles from where I actually wanted to work, just so that I could see as many options as possible. And then you press search, and then what's actually best to do is then to go into the advanced search options. And then from there, you can actually select things like what banding you're going to look for, because otherwise you'll get a load of senior positions. And that, to be honest, was from an NHS side, that was all I used. And then once you're on there, you then once you submit your application, you go through to track, which is what which is where you put in your CV, your personal statement, etc., etc. And that will be where your whole job process kind of goes through. From a private side of things, I don't necessarily have personal experience in applying for private jobs. But what I would say is probably, it's obviously not going to be on the NHS Jobs website, but maybe looking at places like Indeed, and also, reaching out to private practices is probably a really good idea as well, especially the kind of smaller practices where it's maybe one or two people kind of self-employed. You drop them an email, they might not be actively advertising for someone, but if you were to drop them an email and say, look, I'm graduating soon, I'd be really interested in having the opportunity to kind of work for you, or even maybe on a kind of volunteering bit for a little bit to kind of shadow, just creating those contacts. But yeah.
Thank you very much. So obviously you were, as most final year students would be, applying for jobs throughout your final year. How did you navigate that process with sort of putting together your CV, going through that whole process, HCPC registration as well? How did you navigate applying for your first Band 5 rotational role?
So I may as well just tell you my story, really, because I think Jen's question is quite more process led. So I'll maybe just tell you from my side of things. So I applied for 3 jobs. I applied twice for Colchester. I applied once before Christmas. I didn't get an interview, and I think that was because they were desperate for a physio to start then, and obviously I was, I still had the majority of my third year to go through. I applied for a job at Brumfield actually whilst I was on placement at Colchester, and that was probably around February, March time. So I had the interview around then, and really, it's difficult because I was on placement at the time, so I did have to, cram in my precious weekend time when I wanted to be doing relaxing, or also doing reflections and stuff in my placement. It was challenging, but I was able to kind of get a personal statement down. In terms of kind of working out, I think it's important to realize as a student that job applications, they're kind of scored essentially. So you do need to understand the process. And I think there's lots of places online where you can find that information. The best one that I used was actually the clinical physio webinar. And that gave a really, really thorough kind of explanation of applying for NHS jobs from a personal specification and CV, or like a personal statement and CV level, all the way to interview. So I was able to put in my personal statement for Broomfield. I managed to get an interview. I sadly didn't get that job. It was only one position that was available. And I don't know total how many applicants there were, but I got some really good feedback. So even though it was frustrating, I actually live in Chelmsford, but I work in Colchester. So Broomfield, for those that don't know, is in Chelmsford. But although it was disappointing, I got some really good feedback about how to improve my interview technique, how to areas that were good and areas that I could have improved on. So, I think in terms of navigating applying for jobs, I would say one thing is don't necessarily take a rejection as a defeat. You can see it as a positive, and if anything, it prepared me more for my next interview, which was at Colchester. And that was the job I eventually ended up getting. In terms of the kind of interview process, it does vary from place to place. So my interview at Broomfield was probably about an hour long, and it was just me and 2 panel members. And then there was a 15-minute timed written section afterwards. My interview at Colchester was probably about 3.5 hours long, and was like a round robin. Sounds terrifying, but actually it gives you more of an opportunity to show what you can do and show what you're all about in a way. There's pros and cons to the different interview methods, and I've certainly heard some horror stories, as I'm sure many of you had, of day-long interviews. But I think you have to look at the positives when it comes to these things. But yes, so around about April time last year, I think, there was a job opening that came up specifically for summer graduates at Colchester Hospital. Again, I was on placement at another trust. I managed to get my application in. It was certainly a little bit easier the second time round. I think once you've done that first application, you've kind of got a bit of a template. And as I'm sure Jen will cover, when it comes to personal statements, they have to be linked to the person specification. And each interview will have each job application might have a slightly different person specification, but there will be certainly overlaps across those two. So you can kind of use your first one as a template. And so it was a little bit easier the second time round. I managed to get it in. It was probably after being told that I was accepted for interview, it's probably a couple of weeks later, where I was then had my interview. My interview at Colchester was, as I say, it was a round robin style interview. It was 5 separate stations, and it was a mixture of kind of clinical scenarios and then also a job interview. So kind of in terms of navigating applying for jobs, I would say one of the things you need to do to kind of prepare for that is kind of split it up into 2 sections. This is what I did mentally, is split it up into the kind of non-clinical side of things and the clinical side of things. And actually it was the non-clinical side of things, and maybe I was a bit weird in this, but it was the non-clinical questions that scared me the most. Because the clinical side of things, I could, I'd had experience I'd had a good variety of placements. I felt quite confident clinically, and I knew that ultimately I didn't need to know everything. I just needed to be safe. However, with the non-clinical side of things, trying to, kind of answer questions about your strengths and weaknesses requires a level of kind of emotional intelligence and maturity. And it's really frightening when you're talking to somebody that you've just met for the first time to be vulnerable and open. But actually, that is going to come across really well at interview if you can speak truthfully and honestly. Don't be afraid to talk about your weaknesses as much as your strengths. And actually, your weaknesses sounds cheesy, but your weaknesses can be strengths because they can show that you're self-aware. And that you're going to ask for help in a situation where really, you know, as a new 5 on a ward, you probably should be asking for help. So one of the things that I did was I like making lists. That's how I keep my life organized. So I made a strengths and weaknesses list, and I just wrote them all out. And I tried to kind of refine them over a process of a week or so. Also, in terms of kind of preparing for those interviews, you can find practice questions online, and you can find non-clinical and clinical practice questions. And again, I think don't think that you can go into these interviews and just wing it. Preparedness is kind of key. So look for those practice questions and write out your answers and your responses, and you'll probably completely forget everything you wrote down in the interview. But at the same time, some of it will come back to you. And you know, it's really important to have that there. Because the worst thing you can do in an interview is give like a 1-word response to a question, because this is your opportunity to shine and show that, you know, you're the right person for the job, particularly in a very competitive job market. Yeah, I think I'm a bit over time, aren't I? Yeah.
Slightly, but it doesn't matter. It was a fantastic answer. I really appreciate that. But no, like yeah, everything you're saying, amazing there. Thank you very much. It reminds me, so my first placement, I'm just going to waffle on very, very briefly and then we'll move on, I promise. But my first placement, my first educator was actually a band 5 who'd graduated about 4 or 5 months beforehand. And it was really, really beneficial seeing her sort of walking around and saying, okay, someone's come in, I don't know what to do, so I'm gonna go and ask for help. And that was really, really beneficial for me to see, because otherwise you'd see these band 7s who've been working 20 odd years, and you just have this terrifying sort of experience of, oh God, is that what people are expecting of me straight after graduating? So I think that really, really helps, especially students that are about to head out into the job market. I think that's a really big confidence boost. Thank you very much for all that, Chris. We'll come back to you with some more questions later. So next we'll move on to Jen. So Jen, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
So good afternoon, I'm Jen. I qualified in 1999 from the University of Hertfordshire, and I got my first job at what was then Essex Rivers, which was Colchester Hospital. I was fortunate enough to do all of my junior rotations there, my band 6 rotations, and got my band 7 in 2003 as the respiratory team lead. Went through lots of hospital change of names, lots of mergers, now ESNEFT, Colchester site. I've done respiratory team lead all of that time, but I had the opportunity to do probably about 10 years in a split post. So I did 2 days a week with the education team on site, and I was advocating for physiotherapy and occupational therapy placements, trying to improve that student experience within the department. So we developed induction programs, we built in peer supervision, peer learning environments, gaining feedback and those kind of things. Alongside that, I was also doing my ACP pathway. So I did the master's course at Essex University, and I qualified from that in 2020. And that's working within critical care. And at the time it was acute pediatric asthma. So I was prescribing and running my own effective clinic in peds. And then education team also supported me to do my certificate in education. And then I've just finished my lung ultrasound. So I'm doing that part of the doctor's role on ITU, doing the lung ultrasound, which is then helping the doctor's ward round each day. So that's me.
Thank you very much. So the first question we've got for you today is there any type of work experience that tends to stand out more than others in people that are applying for jobs where you are?
We do have a look at what placements people have done, because we want a broad spectrum of it across acute and community, because at ESNEFT on Colchester site, we have 26 band 5 rotations. And that covers all of the acute wards, community hospitals, and stroke ESD community respiratory. So we want that nice broad spectrum. We wouldn't penalise anybody that hasn't had one of those areas, but it just gives us an idea of what we're looking at and where we then need to focus our training and learning. I would say if you qualify and are struggling to get a job, we then look for what you've done in the time it's taken to get a job. So if you're working within a care environment and those kind of things, because that's maintaining all of those communication and clinical skills. Yeah, those are the two main things we look at. Regarding the applications, we make sure, my key thing would be make sure it's complete, because at ESNEFT, HR do our first screening. So if you've got gaps and bits left blank in your application form, HR screen those out. So we got over 100 applications for our last Band 5 job that went out. HR only put 25 through to us. So we're then only shortlisting from those 25. And it's making sure that that job spec and job description, that you've put something in your personal statement that shows you can do all of those skills. It's hitting those right buzzwords. So we are looking for the reflective practice. We're looking for that evidence-based and how you can apply it. So I'd say, tell us what your rotation, your placements are, and then do a little bit of a paragraph about each of those essential things that are in the job spec and how you've done that in a placement or university project. And then tell us a bit about you. That's the bit that's going to make you stand out from everybody else. Is there some volunteer work or traveling or coaching role or CSP lead, something that's going to make you stand out from the rest of the applications we're reading? Because at the end of the day, everybody's got a physio degree, and it's down to who stands out from that page.
Thank you very much. So you've kind of gone into the next question, to be fair, there, with the application process and common questions and structure answers. I know obviously in university interviews, there tends to be a bit of a focus on NHS core values. I think most physiotherapy students or most applicants of a physiotherapy degree will be asked something to do with the NHS values and all that sort of stuff. How prevalent would you say that is in your in the applicants that you receive?
So I would probably say about 70% of the applicants we get mention the NHS values or the trust's values. In interview, the trust mandates we have to ask about the trust values. So the last interviews I did, it was, as you'll know, our trust values are optimistic, appreciative and kind. Which one means the most to you and why? So we try and build those questions into the interview panel. So there'll always be something about our trust values for ESNEFT. And it's how you build those NHS values into that. As Chris has said, we do 5 stations and have done for the last 7-8 years. So there'll be a respiratory station, a MSK orthopedic station, a neuro stroke station, normally a dischargey kind of question, and then the one-to-one interview, which is about finding out about you. So that will have your what placements have you done, which meant the most to you, what did you learn, which did you struggle with, those kind of questions. It will have something normally about confidentiality, something about prioritization, something about your learning needs, or how do your friends view you, those kind of questions. It's more getting to know you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So bonus question based on something that you mentioned about placements. So obviously you would like all applicants to have well-rounded placements. Placements are a bit of a hot topic amongst students at the moment, with a lot of students all vying for similar placements. So if students aren't able to get that sort of experience in the university, things like observational days, observational experience, would you be looking for that kind of proactiveness to sort of almost make up for the sort of the system the environment that we're in at the moment, which means maybe they won't have been able to get a wider breadth of placement experiences?
Yes, we offer observational days. It's either that or it's showing how you've used transferable skills. So you may not have done a core respiratory placement, but you might have done stroke unit. And there is lots of dodgy chests on the stroke unit. So it's showing how you can pull those transferable skills through and demonstrate that you've got that theory and knowledge, rather than I haven't done a respiratory placement, therefore I have no respiratory skills. We use all skills in all areas, and it's demonstrating that to us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Jen. So we move on. We've got two physiotherapists from Alpha Physio, the private clinic working from Ipswich. So we're joined by Jimmy and Lyndsey. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Of course. Hello, welcome. Thank you for having us as well, and thank you to Phil and the CSP guys for organising this. What a fabulous event, by the way. This has been really interesting, and it's actually lovely to be on here and be part of this event. And we're really grateful that you've kind of included this the private practice side of it as well, especially because Jimmy and I, between us, have got quite diverse experience, which I'm sure you'll hear about. But I just want to highlight, yes, you are right, I did used to work with Jen, and at Colchester Hospital. That was my very first job, and I was there about 12 or 13 years. But Jen was my respiratory supervisor, and actually she was Jimmy's placement supervisor as well. So we both have been supervised by Jen in the past. So it's really nice to kind of see some familiar faces. So yes, but actually I kind of echo, we're going to echo a lot of what Sylvia, Chris and Jen have all said, actually, and it's really nice to hear this stuff. But a little bit about us. So Jimmy and I'm going to speak for myself, and then I'll let you speak for yourself, Jimmy. We are married, by the way, so I do a lot of the talking generally, so you'll have to shut me up. So we met at University of Hertfordshire, actually, and we qualified in 2007, have since had our own kind of respective careers. I got a job at Colchester Hospital, and Jimmy's had a completely different pathway altogether. And then when we got married, we kind of eventually decided that we wanted to set up our own business. We'd both specialised in MSK, and it kind of made sense. We have a couple of children, so it was nice to kind of build that thing around our family life as well. So our business has grown to the point now where we've got, well, there's us two and then another 6 employees as well. So we're quite busy, but it's been absolutely brilliant. Love being a physio, and I'm kind of really proud to say that, actually. So it's nice to be on kind of this sort of event, really. So I started at Colchester Hospital. I did my band 5 rotations, and I will highlight here, I think it's worth noting, when we qualified back in the dark ages, the NHS had paid for our tuition fees. So let's not forget that. So the NHS paid for our tuition fees, which is totally different to what it is now. And I think it's worth acknowledging that, because we then the expectation was we went into the NHS because they'd paid for our tuition fees. They gave us all this wonderful experience, and it was a difficult market. I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. It was a difficult time, and I was applying for jobs up in Scotland. I'm from Ipswich originally, actually, so I landed on my feet by getting a job at Colchester, which is just down the road. But there were different. It was different. The landscape was totally different. There were lots more band 5 rotational posts available, which I understand is not the case quite so much now. Although Jen has given me a little bit of hope that there are those posts there, and the interview process is very thorough. But it's a different landscape now. But not necessarily a worse landscape. It's just different. It's just evolved. So I went into band 5 rotational, kind of specialised in MSK. I actually did some paediatric orthopaedics as well, and ended up as an AA in paediatric orthopaedics. And then we set up a business here in 2019, wasn't it? 2019, just before COVID hit. So we opened in the October, COVID hit the March. Luckily at the time we were both in our respective jobs elsewhere, so we were able to survive. So then kind of post COVID, we've then grown the business, left our kind of NHS. Well, I was in the NHS, Jimmy was in professional sport, here we are, really. I do go on, so I'm going to hand over to Jimmy now to introduce himself. Sorry.
It's a snapshot into our life, isn't it? So yes, my name is Jimmy Reynolds. So as Lyndsey said, we qualified back in 2007. So my journey was very different. I actually got a band 5 rotational post down in Kent as my first one. It was the only job I could find at the time. But I actually very quickly transitioned into a relatively new role at the time, which was actually a band 5 MSK rotational post. So it was fairly standard back then that you did a rotational post across all different areas, but I specialized into an MSK post in the mid-Essex area, and it was a wonderful opportunity as a band 5 to work across 4 different sites with numerous different staff, and it was a fantastic experience, and worked through as a senior physio in those roles as well. And then I fell into professional sport, and I quite literally fell into professional sport and went full-time. I got approached by a football club, and I started working with them full time. And basically, I spent 12 years working predominantly at Ipswich Town Football Club. And that was a real culture shock as a physiotherapist at the time, coming from the NHS into a private sporting organisation. But it allowed me to have quite a different view at times, because we were working obviously with athletes, and we were working to ensure that not only were they remaining fit, but they were performing at their best. But also when they got injured, because the world of professional football is a world that has an abundance of money, we were able to travel and see different surgeons, and work across some of the best clinical specialists and surgeons across Europe and arguably the world. So I was really fortunate to work in that world for a long period of time. And it enhances your clinical reasoning to a way where you're under pressure. And I think if you enjoy a bit of pressure, professional sport is a really encouraging and exciting area to work within. And then, as Lyndsey said, after many years in football, I decided we decided to start the business. But at the same time, after being out of the business out of professional sport, I found myself working back in it. So I now work with England football. So I travel away on international breaks with their football team, and get to travel the world. I was recently in Portugal. It was lovely. It was sunny. It was nice and warm.
We don't talk about that.
And then we came back to the lovely British weather. So right now we're in a situation where we run a private practice, as Lyndsey said. We work with predominantly an MSK and a sporting population, but quite frankly, we're seeing absolutely everything. So we are getting neurological referrals, stuff that's relating to respiratory work as well. And we see people from as young babies, which was Lyndsey's speciality within the pediatric orthopedic world, all the way through to elderly populations. I think people are looking at the private world a lot more now. I think with the options that people have across the, whether it be through medical health insurance, whether it be through cash pay, whether it be through the NHS and some issues that perhaps waiting times have had, people are turning to the private world far quicker now, I think. So I think many years ago, private physiotherapy was very much sports and your local amateur athletes. We see absolutely everything from pre-operative, post-operative, neurological conditions, MSK work of all ages. And we've really fortunate, we've grown a fantastic team of varying ability as well, from junior physios to clinical specialists within our team. So it's been a really exciting time over the last 6 years for us. And we're only getting busier and we're only getting bigger, and the grey hairs are continuing to come. So
fantastic, thank you very much both. So you mentioned obviously starting off in a band 5 rotational role. Is that something that you would consider? Because I know that's the most talked about pathway. You graduate and you find your first band 5 rotational role. Is that something that you would suggest? Is there? Do you think there's benefit into skipping that stage? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we can argue it from both angles, because we've had 2 different experiences of it. So I did do the band 5 rotations, and for a long time, and actually I still maintain that it's good to have a breadth of experience. So whether that's as a band 5 rotational physio, or whether you get that experience from your student placements, or you get it some other way, I think it's really, really important to have a breadth of experience, because as Jimmy said, people are not just turning up with back pain, they're turning up with back pain with a background of COPD, or they've had a previous stroke, or they've been in a car accident and they've got a foot drop. So you're seeing these these complex presentations, even more so than we used to see. Actually, the more and more people are coming into the private world with varying presentations, and I think actually a breadth of experience is paramount to actually understand what you're seeing in front of you, so that you can make educated decisions. So that might not be coming from a band 5 rotational post though, so because the options or the availability of such posts might not be there. So it's, I don't think it's the be all and end all. I don't think it's absolutely essential. And as Sylvia was saying earlier, you know, I think there's lots of different areas or avenues you can go down to gain experience, and it doesn't have to be in this band 5 rotational post. And I think if you feel that you cannot get that post, or there just isn't the option there, don't worry, don't let that stress you out, because actually you can be a brilliant physio without having done that rotational post. So I wouldn't suggest that it's absolutely essential, is my take on it. I did it, I got some great experience from it, but I did specialize very quickly. I only did that for about 15 months, and 6 months of that was in MSK. So, but but then I did the lovely respiratory on calls, I will hasten to add, which were terrifying. But but you know, it's I digress. But yes, don't worry if that post isn't available, because there are many options.
I think from my perspective as well, it's a case of, if you are looking to apply to various different sectors, it's understanding what those sectors have on offer for you. So for example, within a private organization, if you're going to apply for a post there, it's understanding what's the skills, what's the challenges that I'm going to face within that role, and ultimately as a band 5, what support do I have? I think if you're moving into a private situation where you're very much on your own, I don't think we'd particularly suggest that. But if you're working within a private organization that has a well-rounded support network, there's clinical supervisions on a regular basis, there's a pathway, there's an education pathway within that structure, it can be incredibly supportive. It can be very challenging, and it will support your development at the right time. I think gone are the days of being left to your own devices in some ways in a lot of the private practices now. I think people are recognizing that the education of a band 5 is paramount for the success of the business. So I think if you're going to look to apply for a job as a band 5 in a private organization, it's really challenging that organization to know whether they can support you as well. As I say, I didn't do the rotations. I was very set on what I wanted to do, but that's not to say I didn't have experiences within those rotations of all the different areas. And equally, if you go into the professional sport world, or academy football, for example, you know, young levels of football, there's lots of support and skills that you learn, which are all relatable, because, you know, for example, from immediate first aid trauma, you know, the communication skills, the quick clinical reasoning that you might have to have, the respiratory issues, you know, understanding that you might be at a football team, but a child can still suffer from a pneumothorax. You start to develop lots of different skills, really wherever you go, I think, as long as you have the support network around you.
Thank you very much, both. So in terms of your own experiences in interviewing applicants for the private sector, what are your top tips in terms of preparation, would you say?
I have a list, actually. I'm very sorry. I will try to get through it quickly. So from our perspective, we are very much on culture and personality. So we interview the person. So actually, I wanted to highlight that these long interviews. So Chris, you referenced the 3.5-hour interview at Colchester, and you know, some horror stories of kind of day-long interviews. I actually think the reason they do that is to get you to relax so that you're there long enough, so you relax, so that they can see who you are as a person. And I think having a one-to-one interview, and it's often Jimmy and I that do the 2 interviews, and I understand that can be, you know, with 20 years experience, I understand that can be quite intimidating and it's very nerve-wracking. Any job interview is very nerve-wracking, isn't it? So what we're trying to get from people is the personality. We want to know who you are as a person, what you can bring to the team, whether you like a bit of fun. Like, we're not boring people. We like fun. We don't want to come to work we are serious, and we take our job very seriously, and we are professionals, but we want to have fun with it as well. And you know, we want to get to know you in an interview process. So that's what we tend to recruit for. If we can get along with someone, we can see some personality from them. If you don't answer the clinical questions brilliantly, don't worry about it. You know, what we want to see from those clinical questions is what your brain does. Can you actually reason? You don't have to have all the correct answers. Can you reason? Does it make sense? Are you logical in your thought processes? But actually we want to get to know you better. Are you going to fit? Because we have a small team here. We want to know if you're going to create problems for us or if you're going to fit in and we're going to have a good time. So that is primarily the purpose of our interview. So that's going to be my main tip. Is I know it's nerve-wracking and it's high pressured, particularly when the competition is fierce. It's a high pressured situation, but really try and show us who you are as a person, because that gets you a lot further than getting the answers right. So that's my top tip. We're a private practice. We are a business. We have to make money to be able to pay people. That is the that's the bottom line. But it's the same in the NHS, by the way, as well, particularly in an MSK service, where you can equate, right, that appointment costs that much money. It's exactly the same. I remember the manager that I had when I worked at Colchester Hospital. She was very good with sharing the business side of it with us. So that we understood that there was a commercial side to it as well. We don't sit on a pot of cash. We have to get people through the door, and we do it in an ethical way as well. All we do as physios everywhere across the board is we help people make good decisions for their health. And we are ethical in the way that we do that. And once we've got people better, we want to keep them better. We don't want people on this revolving kind of door system. So having some commercial awareness and understanding that it's a business, and just having that little bit of knowledge behind you there, really. Another point I had here, but Jimmy's already covered actually, is asking a prospective employer what support and training they can provide you. I think is really important. There are still some private practices and there are many actually in our local area that don't employ their staff. So we employ all of our staff because we want to create this team culture where you want to be part of something and grow together. And as part of that, we're able to give you we give our staff lots of training. They have weekly 1 hour in service trainings. We have bi-weekly one-to-one supervisions. We offer a lot of training. But if you're self-employed, then some people are less keen to come in if it's unpaid time. So that's why we kind of try to employ everybody. But yeah, just definitely ask what sort of training and what pathway they have for progression. I appreciate that you're in the beginning of a career, but actually you want to see where you're going to go, don't you? In the NHS, you've got your levels that you work through. Is it the same in private practice? Well, it is the same where we work, because we've spent a lot of time kind of creating our version of the kind of KSF, if you like, and the pathway. So ask the prospective employer what the options are. Loads of people have touched on this as well. Having additional experience on your CV, or having something that makes you stand out. It's a tough climate out there. Go out there, get some voluntary experience. I mean, we provide free massage at the Ipswich Half Marathon as an example, and we ask the local universities if there's anybody that wants to come and volunteer to provide the massage for us. So we bring these opportunities to the students. So take these up, just add that to your CV, and then it gives you something to talk about as well, doesn't it? Yeah, and then that's fine. That was actually my only thing. I just wanted to highlight, I made a note here about Chris's point as well about rejection from interviews as well. I interviewed for jobs and didn't get them, and at the time I was absolutely devastated. But that is growth, actually. We've got 2 young girls, and you can't succeed at everything. Failure is, so long as you learn from what goes wrong, and ask for feedback as well as to why you might not have got a particular position, then you can improve on that next time as well. So don't take it as a massive failure. It's just a journey that you're on, and you'll end up with something in the end. So that's
Thank you very much. Jimmy, anything to add on to that?
The only thing from my perspective is I like to see a bit of passion. So we like to know what you're interested in. So you're a physiotherapist. Why are you a physiotherapist? So if we get some plain generic answers, it doesn't excite us. For me, I want to know what drives you and what makes this industry interesting for you. Because if you've got passion for it, I know you're going to have some drive and dedication to what you're doing, and you're interested in bettering yourself. So having something that gets you going and you can highlight that, I think, is a really positive thing as well.
Thank you very much. Huge thank you to both of you. Some fantastic answers there. So we're going to move on to a bit of a Q&A section. So these are some, I don't actually have access to the Q&A part of the chat, but I have some questions that have already been submitted. So tell you what, I'll give you two a little bit of a break. Chris, I'll come back to you. How have you dealt with career burnout, if that's something you've experienced, and how do you manage the work-life balance? As I can imagine, going straight from university to working in the NHS, I can imagine there's been possibly a little bit of a shift. You might tell me I'm wrong, in which case feel free.
No, definitely, it's been a massive shift. Yeah. I mean, I had a bit of a break between graduating and starting work. So I had about 3 months off, which was, I would definitely recommend that for those of you that are lucky enough to be in a position where you might have jobs lined up for after uni. It is, you know, the physiotherapy degree is a really tough 3 years or 2 years, whether you did the masters or the apprenticeship. And, you know, I would highly recommend taking some time off. And actually, in that time off, I sort of realized that I'd kind of forgotten who I am a little bit, because for those 4 years total, because I did an access course as well, so for those 4 years, 3 including the degree, I had one singular goal, which was to become a physio. And at the end of it, I sort of had to remind myself, what is it I actually like doing and who am I, and sort of find hobbies again, outside of studying or just doing things to kind of de-stress. So that's one thing. To be honest, in answer to this question, I mean, I've been working now about 8 months. I'm coming to the end of my first full rotation. So rotations are 6 months at ESNEFT. I did 2 months in Gen Med. I've got a week and a half left in trauma and orthopedics. And I'm still kind of trying to work things out in terms of managing work-life balance. Like trauma and orthopedics, I've enjoyed it, but it has at times, probably about 3 times over the past 6 months, I've reached a point where I felt just probably the nearest I've been to burnout before, in terms of just feeling really tired all the time, feeling kind of foggy-headed, not being able to, not feeling quite myself. I think the way I've tried to manage it is you have to make use of your annual leave. I wouldn't recommend just saving it all up, and you know, it sounds great having a nice 3-week holiday at some point, but I would recommend trying to use little bits here and there throughout the year. We also at ESNEFT, we have and I imagine other trusts do a similar sort of thing, where we have like a preceptorship program. So the reason I'm off today and not at work is because I'm actually using this as a study day. I will be doing some studying later, Jen. Yeah, so I think I'm still trying to work this one out, but I think make use of taking some time off. And also, you know, you're not just a physio, you're a human being, and it's important to think about what you enjoy outside of physio. And actually, you know, as Jimmy and Lyndsey kind of touched on, you know, those things that you're passionate about, kind of, there is an overlap, and they do feed into your career as well. And they, you know, they're great things to talk about at interview and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. So I'll move on to Sylvia, actually, if you wouldn't mind. We've got a question here about what to do when you're near the ceiling of opportunities or pathways within the NHS. I know this is something you've had experience with as well, and I'd love to touch on Jen's experience with this too. But
so I think sometimes, you know, you see positions perhaps in a traditional sort of career progression, and maybe you feel ready that you want to go on to a band 5, band 6, band 7, and perhaps because lack of movement of staff, there aren't the opportunities. So I think there's definitely something about, or if you've been for interviews and they're saying you don't have that experience, or there's something that's lacking, there are lots of networks out there. So for example, there is an allied health professionals network for quality improvement. So stepping into a space like that, where you can gain the experience of how do you develop working on a project that could be across a regional level, rather than just in your workplace, that you're then able to take back into your workplace and demonstrate to your line manager why it is important, why you have the necessary skills now to be able to move up. But I also, going back to sort of my earlier sort of conversation, I think careers can be very portfolio now. So, you know, explore opportunities for, I certainly through many years worked both in the NHS and in the private sector. And so you can work in a dual roles. You can also look to actually stepping completely out of physio, maybe for one day a week, taking on, a role within the CSP, or you could be stepping into maybe project management. We have, many colleagues in our local system who are physios by background, who have taken on an opportunity to build their knowledge and their skills into something else, and then have ended up going down a completely different career path. And actually, several people that I've spoken to, including, Suzanne Rastrick, who is the chief AHP officer for England. When you speak to her about her career path, the side steps that she's taken in order to get where she is has almost been more valuable than following this linear sort of pathway and waiting for something to come up. So I think it's really about if you feel you're being ceilinged because of either lack of staff movement or lack of opportunity to develop skills in those areas, then look for it outside of your current workplace. Hopefully
Thank you very
that's
much.
answered.
Perfect. Jen, anything to add on to that?
I can talk about what we offer at ESNEFT. So all new graduates will go onto the preceptorship course, which is for the first year. It's 1 day a month study leave that builds on all of those foundational skills to be in the NHS. You'll be allocated a mentor throughout that year, and that mentor will follow you through your rotation, so that doesn't change. We have an appraisal every rotation at the beginning to set objectives for the next 6 months, and then you do a full end appraisal at the end. And you can build career pathways into those. We then have weekly in-service training within the team that is directed by what the team members want to cover. We also have bands 2 to 7 forums every month. So band 5 forum I arrange, and we get external speakers in, cover topics they want to cover. Every member of staff I do a careers conversation with every year. Even though I've stepped back from my dedicated educational role, I've kept that educational link. We have just started as a trust to support the Enhanced Clinical Practitioner Apprenticeship, which is a level 6 apprenticeship open for AHPs, which covers a bit about all the different 4 pillars. So your research, your education, your clinical, and your management. So for those staff that are at a band 6 level and don't know which way they want to go in their career, this touches on all of those pillars to help direct. If we've got a staff member that we know where they want to go, we do have the option of static band 6 posts, so they become more team rotational. So I've got 3 on respiratory, and they just rotate round our respiratory band 6 rotations, and I know other teams have those. So once they're in a team rotational post, we will then support them down those ACP pathways. Or if they know they want to be in education, we can support the Cert Ed, and we can get them into those dedicated mentor roles for our own apprentices. So we try and find out what each individual wants, and we help guide you within the realms of what we can support as a trust. More of our ceiling comes at that top 7 level. So I've been in my ACP role for many years now, and I'm still the 7. There's no funding for that 8A role, but we've escalated it through our management channels, and they are now starting to look at it. So hopefully we'll catch up with that our nursing counterparts.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so moving back to Alpha Physiotherapy, I remember, Lyndsey, when we floated this question before, you said that you actually had a fair bit of experience with the topic. So it's a bit of a change, but what is the danger of AI on job security? So yeah, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep this brief, but we have experience of the fact that I'm not very good at that. So AI is actually really exciting. I mean, oh God, I can talk for days about this. I won't, I promise. But this is a really, really big opportunity for us. And quite frankly, it's here. So we have to get on with it. We have to accept that AI is here. We have to accept that it's changing everything, not just the physio world, everything in our day-to-day life as well. So we have two options. We either bury our head in the sand and ignore it and therefore get behind, or we embrace it and go with it. And I think that provides lots and lots of opportunities for us. Just a couple of examples of how I mean, everybody's on ChatGPT now, aren't they? And I'm sure there are actually better ones out there anyway. But even my mum manages to search stuff up on ChatGPT, and we're actually getting inquiries through people who have they're not Googling anymore. They're putting it into ChatGPT. Who is the best physio in the area, or who should I reach out to for X condition? And we're getting phone calls from people who have found us on ChatGPT. So I think that's worth kind of knowing that people are using it for what used to be Google. So we are using it in two major ways in clinic here. We have a note dictation system that we're using. So, and it's all data secure. We have lots of policies in place to protect both ourselves and the patients as well. So we do take that very seriously. But we have the sessions are recorded, so that then when the physios come to write their notes at the end, you've got transcripts. It halves the amount of note writing time. Well, more than halves actually. You're getting new patient notes done in about 2 minutes flat, because you just have to edit some of the information if it's picked up the wrong person's spoken or something like that. So that's a really, really positive step for us, and it's saving our staff a lot of admin time, which is absolutely fabulous. None of the data gets saved. It's all deleted afterwards. So it's all secure in kind of that regard. And then the other thing which I launched, we had a brief call yesterday about 11:30, I think it was, and about 30 minutes prior to that, I launched an AI receptionist who is going to take telephone calls for us. We have she's called Sophie. We have fed her loads of information about the business, and she can book directly into the diary. She can change appointments. There's also the option to put the customer through to a human, and if she can't answer any questions, it would get deferred to a human anyway. And people don't necessarily want to speak to a robot, but that just helps. What it will do is free up our admin staff to provide an excellent experience to our clients coming through the door. That's what it's doing, so that instead of being on the phone when someone's arriving for their appointment, that's being dealt with by Sophie, and then we can have a nice experience with the customer coming through the door. We're able to go and get them a cup of coffee and ask how their grandchildren are doing and all that sort of stuff. So it's really kind of helping that patient experience. I think in terms of the dangers of AI, I actually think that's a dangerous way of looking at it. I don't think we're going to lose our jobs over this. I really don't think you can replace, because AI is, let's be real, it's robotic, it's not real. People want human connection. People want to build rapport. They want to have relationships with people. Physiotherapists are actually in a lovely category of professionals who deal with people on a one-to-one basis. We communicate with people. This is where our skills lie. We are excellent communicators, and people still will want that to the end of time. So robots are not going to replace us. People want to be touched, in terms of assessment, in terms of treatment, regardless of what area of physiotherapy you're working in, and that cannot be replaced to any good degree by AI. So what it might do is that if people are using it to educate themselves better, people might come to us, particularly from a private practice perspective, with a potential diagnosis already. So they've put all their symptoms, I've done this and this is what my symptom is. and they come with a diagnosis that may or may not be accurate, so we can't guarantee that they're going to know exactly what's going on, but I suspect that this technology is going to improve and evolve, at lightning speed, but that still cannot replace the skills that we offer. So I don't think it is something to be scared of, and I think the only thing that we need to be conscious of is that we don't get left behind. So we have to go with it. We have to accept it. We have to find ways to embrace it. So I'm not going to say where she works, but my sister works for a local charity, and they refuse, if anybody mentions AI, if it looks like they've used AI in any of their job applications, they get rid of them. And I think that's actually really backwards. I think you need to put effort into job applications. And I'm not suggesting for a second we write dissertations or job applications using AI. That's not what I mean. But I think also we need to embrace it. And I think if you're not embracing it, you are getting left behind. So I think it's a really, really, really good opportunity for us to move forwards. And what AI is really good at is replacing repetitive, low value tasks. So actually it makes our life quicker because we're not having to spend hours and hours doing repetitive things that we used to do. Actually, those can get done a lot quicker.
Thank you very much. It sounds like we could have a whole webinar on the AI in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if any more questions have gone into the Q&A chat in the group. I've got 2 more questions here, which I reckon we can buzz through quickly.
I've got one.
Yeah.
So Grace Leach has said, can you please share reputable places to find CPD activities and courses?
Oh, great question. Yeah, anyone got any suggestions on CPD courses and where to find them? I know from my experience, I've seen a fair few listed on the CSP website, and this has just been, there have been a few weekend courses I've found just from my own interests and people that I follow and want to learn from, but that's been my experience. I don't know what anyone else.
I think there's more individual companies now offering CPD. Years ago, there used to be certain websites you go to and it'd have a lot of the different courses available. I think it's become a little bit more individual, but there are a couple of good ones. So Physio Network is one which is widely kind of pushed on social media, which has got hundreds of different lectures on there, which is fantastic across all different specialities. That's certainly one we give all our staff access to. And there's an Australian one called Clinical Edge as well, which is very similar, and it's just the Australian version of it. But again, it has access to a wide variety of topics, subjects, and all the way. And we're not just talking about kind of really specialist things. We're talking about stuff that's very relevant to a band 5, identifying red flags and things like this. So I think it's just a case of looking. Social media is actually quite good for this. I think you can find a lot on there. And there's a few others which are kind of UK based. HNDP, I think it's called, which is a London based one, is another one. But I would certainly start with some of the more web based ones to have a look at, especially because they're all online.
I was just going to say, especially because they're all online, because particularly going back to these previous points, if you haven't got that breadth of experience from your placements, you can then show willingness that you've gone on and you've identified the gaps in your knowledge and you said, right, well, actually, I didn't get experience in this area, but I have taken it upon myself to do these CPD. They're not massive. They're not like well, you can get modular courses, but some of them are just mini kind of bite-sized modules as well. So, show willingness to go and kind of close those gaps in your knowledge.
I'm not quite sure who was first with the hand up. Was it Sarah or Sylvia?
It was Sarah.
Okay, Sarah, all yours.
Right. I'm just going to say, obviously, the professional networks do sort of different sort of courses and things that members can sort of sign up to. So it's worth sort of thinking about what networks you're interested in. Obviously, the regional networks have got their events going on. And just because you're part of the East of England regional network, don't forget you can still access regional network webinars and events from other regions. So you don't have to stick to the East of England. So if you see something you fancy on a topic from a different region, then you can sign up to that too. In terms of other things that you can access in terms of CPD, there's loads of modules online out there from NHS England. and I'll try and put together a list of some of the other ones that I can't think of straight off the top of my head. I think it's gone out of my head, one of the ones I was thinking of. Apologies for that. There was one other thing I was thinking about, and podcasts is the other thing. So I know they might not be sort of very popular necessarily, but a lot of my sort of learning I often used to do on podcasts because it was something I could do while I was traveling somewhere else or what have you. And there's a lot of good physio podcasts out there, so have a look out for those as well.
Thank you very much. Sylvia.
So in addition to all the excellent points already raised, I would just say, and totally agree with Lyndsey, I think it's a great way if you've got an obvious gap to do something. But if you don't necessarily have obvious gaps, don't feel that as a new graduate or as a student that you've got to go out and spend lots of money on a course, because really what we're looking for, as we've all said right at the beginning, I can't remember whether it was Jenny or Lyndsey, but possibly both, is we're looking for the basics. We are not expecting you to come out knowing it all. So I think, know things like your red flags, know how to take a basic assessment. Those are the key things. There's plenty of time to do lots of learning as you go onto your career, and you'll never get to a point where you know it all, ever. So I just want to caution that you don't have to be spending money really to be doing lots of CPD and learning.
Sorry.
Fantastic.
I was going to jump in, and I'd just sort of like signing up to some courses. So there is a disclaimer on sort of the frontline articles around sort of some of the courses that you do need to be conscious of whether or not they are part of physiotherapy practice or whether they are sort of an add-on. So don't sort of just assume because they're advertised in Frontline or something that they're appropriate for where you're at this point in time. You need to really have a think about that. For example, I think I had someone contact us recently about doing an injection course straight after university. And it depends on where your career is going and what your plan is to do. There are plenty of other things I would suggest you do ahead of injections. There's lots of consolidation you need to do at the start of your career before thinking about injections, for example.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got around about 5 minutes left. There's two questions that I have written down here in terms of buzzwords and side options for bringing in more income. Do people feel like those have been covered already? I know we've definitely touched on them, especially Jen with interview buzzwords and things like that. Or does anyone have anything more to say on interview buzzwords or alternative options of income? Opening up to the floor.
I'm quite happy to jump in if you want about income.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a topic that people bring up where finances may become quite key for some people. I guess the key thing from my perspective and kind of our experience is that when you're early in your career, I think your key focus is on about you becoming an excellent practitioner in whatever area you go into. And there's a trade-off between making yourself very busy. I certainly did it when I was a band 5. I was working in 2 different clinics as well as my NHS post. And I would probably be doing a 7:30 till 3:30 clinic in the NHS. And then I would from 4:30 through to about 9:30 be working in either a private clinic or in a sporting organisation. And that was 4 or 5 days a week. So being busy doesn't equate to necessarily being an excellent practitioner. And although the financial reward can be you might feel it's beneficial at the time, in your early in your career, focus on really making sure that you're becoming an excellent practitioner and choosing the activities that, if you are going to do additional work, it comes back to that same point of what's valuable to you. Where can you gain experience? Where can you draw more knowledge from? So, for example, the simple opportunities are working with a sporting organisation, match day covers in rugby and football, which allows you to start upskilling in different areas, in first aid, in your communication skills, Or it could be within a private clinic or sports massage work, which can be a little bit more hands-on. But there's lots of events out there, like we said about the working with organisations such as ours for marathons and things like that. But there are opportunities out there. I think what you've really just got to weigh up is whether that's the right thing for you at this moment in time. To, you know, where are you putting your eggs in your basket? Can you make sure you're really gaining the right experiences and not just becoming very busy, because busy doesn't necessarily allow you then to become the best practitioner.
Thank you very much. Right, in the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to jump in and very, very briefly signpost anyone that is graduating this year or would like to know what the CSP is doing in terms of support. There's a graduate handbook that's been put together by the CSP. So there's plenty of information out there available for all the way from HCPC registration to a draft letter to your local MP talking about advocating and for more Band 5 job roles, as Sylvia was talking about earlier. I think, Sarah, you put in a little bit of information about the regional networks. So that's there's a link on further up on the chat for the East of England regional network. If you go on there, you'll be able to navigate your way to all the other different regional networks. You'll see different points of contact. I would also like to take this time to thank massive thank you to Amelia Sutton, who is campaigns and regional events manager of East of England, and also 2 other regions which are evading me at the moment. So she's got her work cut out for her, especially when she's been you know, doing all the support and all the massive amounts of help she's put together for this event today. So Amelia has been silent throughout the chat today, but it wouldn't have happened without her. Thank you very much. So yeah, and a huge thank you to all the professionals that have joined us today: Sylvia, Lyndsey, Jimmy, Jenny, Chris, Holmes, and Sarah. Yeah, hugely appreciative of all of you and for all the knowledge and experience that you've shared. Thank you to everyone that's turned up today and submitted questions. Thank you for everyone for your engagement. Yeah, I think it's been I hope you all agree it's been a fantastic event, and I've got a lot that I've been able to take away from this, and I hope you all have as well. So yeah, thank you very much. If there are any further questions, please chuck them in the chat. But other than that,
I'm just going to jump in, Phil, just to also say on behalf of all of us, and I'm sure all of those attending this session today, thank you to you as well, because I know you've put in a huge amount of effort. So just wanted to pass on our thanks and recognise you as well.
Thanks very much. But yeah, we'll hopefully at some point, Amelia and I have been speaking about trying to get a bit more of a CSP related fair on at some point within the region. So hopefully in the nearish future, we'll be able to provide something like that. But yeah, thank you everyone for your engagement, and yeah, have a lovely rest of your week.